So I'm joined this morning by two very special guests to break down what we're seeing. I'm joined by trial attorney Ben Chu and criminal defense attorney and former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. Gentlemen, it is a pleasure to have you both here. Ben, I'll start with you. This felt like the crux of the case to me. I mean, if you're trying to understand what was the harm, what did these plaintiffs suffer as a result of what Alex Jones did in a case where words matter, they have consequences, this is the testimony that I think is critical for the plaintiffs. What was your take on what we heard?
Jesse, first, it's an honor to be here with you this morning, with you and Gene. So thank you for that. I completely agree with you. I think this testimony from Mr. Parker was incredibly compelling. It's precisely what the jury needs to hear in trying to put a monetary value on this appalling conduct. And I think it shows into sharp relief how awful Alex Jones's comment was, that he's done apologizing. He will never be done apologizing for the pain he's put these families through.
Yeah, I mean, Gene, Ben is talking about what happened last week when he was agitated. He was on the stand. He said he's done apologizing. He's apologized a million times. I don't think that's what the jury really wants to hear, coupled with what we're hearing from these plaintiffs. How does a jury monetize that, though? How do they look at that and say, okay, we're listening to these words. We think it should be this much in compensatory damages. We think it should be this much in punitive damages. How does that work?
Well, what I would do is, and Ben's got more experience in this area, when you do your opening or closing statement, you have to give the jury talking points. You have to give them a roadmap as to how they award damages. So what's going to be interesting in this case for me, it's sort of like a criminal case where you give them the elements. In closing argument, you have to give them a roadmap as to how they determine the damage to these victims' families emotionally. What's great about this case for the plaintiffs is there's no issue of proximate cause. He made that outrageous, disgusting, vile statement, and almost immediately there was repercussions, death threats, violent threats against the families of the victims. So that's what I would look for. Now, I think this is one of the last witnesses. I'd always watch the jury, and Ben in the Depp trial is watching that jury. I want to see their reaction so that when I talk about a certain witness in closing, I go back to my notes that me or my colleagues are taking as to how the jury was reacting to certain witnesses.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, before we end with Mr. Parker, I just want to go back to this because he said that when he first became aware of these comments being made about him and his family, he actually tried to hide it from his wife in order to protect her. Take a listen.
Take us through that week, Robbie, as you start to experience the beginning of this campaign. Just take us through those next couple of days and what this incoming is looking like.
So it was early in the morning, the first time I'd ever heard of it. It had just been hours since I had given that statement. It hadn't even been 48 hours since Emily died. And that really threw me off. I was talking about how I felt somewhat grounded, and I was looking for something to keep me stable because my compass was spinning. I didn't know which way was what. And seeing these comments broke that connection I had, that stability. And it was just like this littering of things. And there were still interspersed the love and support, and then these comments, and the love and support, and then these comments. And I showed it to my sister-in-law, and she just tried to reassure me that there's just these crazy people that this is what they like to do. They just like to take things and exploit people or whatever. And that made me feel a little bit better. For some reason, I knew that Alyssa had requested space, and she didn't want to be bombarded with questions, and we are having to start to plan a lot of things. We had an appointment to go to the morgue to see Emily on Sunday afternoon. And so trying to get my head wrapped around that stuff. But then these things were happening. And I didn't want to tell Alyssa about it. I immediately started to feel very protective over this information not getting to anybody that I cared about. And so over the next few days, as I'm simultaneously trying to figure out and plan, what are we going to do with Emily's body? How are we going to get it to Utah? Who's going to pay for that? What are those logistics like? How do I start planning a funeral? I've never planned a funeral before. Trying to get all these things figured out, and all these people are coming, and they're very helpful, but they're asking you lots of questions, and what do you want, and what do you want? And I'm trying not to overwhelm Alyssa. And amongst all of this, people keep coming up and telling me, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Did you know about this?
Meaning, have you seen what they're saying?
Exactly.